Love of years. An elderly couple returns to the place where they first met. The old man said, "Do you remember the first time I met you more than 50 years ago? We left this cafe, went around the corner behind the detention center, and I had sex with you." "Oh yes, dear," the old lady replied with a smile. "Let's go out there and repeat my performance." A young man overheard their conversation and found it interesting. He followed them. Sure enough, he saw them near the barbed wire fence. As the little old lady reached for the fence, the old man took off his pants. What follows is some of the most energetic sex a man has ever seen. The speed can simply be described as shocking. Finally, they fell to the ground together and did not move for a long time. The man said to himself, "I must know his secret." The man walked up to the old gentleman and said, "Sir, I have never seen anyone as affectionate as you in my life, especially at your age. Do you have any secrets?" The old man replied, "Son, 50 years ago that fence didn't have electricity." He decided to take revenge on the driver. Part 1. A man went to Las Vegas to gamble and lost all his money. He didn't even have enough money to call a taxi, but he hailed one anyway. He explained to the driver that he would pay him back next time and gave him his phone number. But the driver told him, "Get out of my cab." He walked all the way to the airport and then back home. At some point, he decided to go back to Vegas again, and this time he won big. He picked up his luggage and headed to the airport with all his new winnings. There was a line of taxis, and finally he saw the driver who had kicked him out last time at the end of the line. He stood for a moment, thinking about how he could get revenge on the driver. So he got into the first taxi. He decided to take revenge on the driver. Part 2. "How much is it to the airport?" he asks. The driver says, $15. "Great. How much is it for a blowjob on the way there?" The cab driver says, "Get the fuck out of my cab." So he goes to the next one and asks the same thing. He does this all the way down the line of drivers, each one kicking him out. He finally gets to the last driver, the one from his last trip. He asks, "Hey, how much to the airport?" Driver responds, $15. The guy hands him $15 and says, "Great, let's go." And so the driver leaves, slowly passing all the other drivers who are staring out their window, while the guy in the back smiles back with a thumbs up. The fortune teller and the frog. A frog decides to visit a fortune teller to find out if he'll ever find his princess. The fortune teller reads his palm, and after a few brief moments of contemplation, begins her reading. "I have good news, and I have bad news. Which would you like to hear first?" The frog, anxious for the possibility of true love, chooses the good news first. "You are going to meet the most beautiful girl," the fortune teller says. "She's going to be very interested in you and will know everything there is to know about you. You'll open up to her and give her your heart." Pleased, the frog then cautiously asks for the so-called bad news. To this, the fortune teller replies, "You'll meet her in a biology class." A guy is out running in the park. He sees an older man sitting on a bench with an upset look on his face. The guy waves it off and continues his run. Another lap later, he sees an older woman sitting on that same bench with the older guy, both of them looking upset. Again, the runner waves it off, but this time his curiosity has been piqued. Every time he passes by them, the runner still sees that its occupants look upset. When he finishes his final lap, he decides to stop. "Okay, I've been running laps by this bench here," the runner says, "and every time I've passed by it, I see you two sitting there looking upset. What's going on?" The man answers, "Come, sit down, and we'll explain why." So the runner looks at his watch. "Yeah, sure. I'm done with my run anyway." He sits down on the bench next to the man and woman. "So, what's the problem?" "The problem?" the woman asks. "They just painted this bench. Sherlock and Watson go camping. Sherlock Holmes and Watson are on a camping trip. After a good session of singing Wonderwall around the campfire, they retire to their sleeping bags. Several hours later, Sherlock wakes up and nudges Watson awake. Watson groggily asks, "What?" "Watson, look up at the sky and tell me what you see." Watson thinks about this for a minute, wiping his eyes. "I see millions of stars," Watson answers. "What does that tell you?" asks Sherlock. Well, astronomically, it tells me there are millions of galaxies. Astrologically, I can see that Saturn is in Virgo. Theologically, I see that God is all-powerful and we are insignificant. What does it tell you, Holmes? Sherlock remains silent for a few seconds. It tells me that someone has stolen our tent. A man is wandering deep in the forest when he comes upon a strange-looking pub. The man walks inside and is immediately greeted by the barkeep. "What can I get you?" the barkeep asks. "I'll just have a beer," the man replies. "Unfortunately, the guy who just left drank our last beer," the barkeep says. "However, I do have another drink I can offer you. The elixir of the forest elves." "What's that?" the man inquires. The barkeep responds. "It's a potent mix of dragon blood, unicorn hair, and fairy tears." The man thinks for a moment. "All right, I'll try one of those." The barkeep gets to work behind the bar, mixing the mystical ingredients. Lights flash, colors change, smoke billows. He returns with a goblet, its contents bubbling out of the sides. Intrigued, the man takes a nervous sip. "Jesus Christ," the man exclaims. "That tastes horrible." "No shit," says the barkeep. "Why do you think the last guy drank all the beer?" A boy brought home his report card. A boy brought home his report card to show his parents how well he did in math class. His report card showed 90 for his math grade. His father was ecstatic. However, his mother knew he was terrible at math and thus simply couldn't believe he got 90. She looked closely at the report card and noticed that the 9 and the 0 looked to have different handwriting styles. She immediately became suspicious. "Son, tell me, did you add a 0 to the end of your grade?" "No," the boy replied. "I'm going to ask you again," said the mom. "Did you add the 0 yourself?" "No, Mom. I didn't add the 0. Fuming, the mom cuts him off. "Okay, since you're not telling me the truth, you are grounded for 1 month." "No, Mom, please," the boy begged. "I swear I didn't add the 0. "This is your last chance," said the mom. "Tell me the truth." "I didn't add the 0. I added the 9. 3 men die on Christmas Eve. 3 men died on Christmas Eve and were met by St. Peter at the pearly gates. In honor of this holy season, St. Peter said, 'You must each possess something that symbolizes Christmas to get into heaven.'" The Englishman fumbled through his pockets and pulled out a lighter. He flicked it on. "It's a candle," he said. "You may pass through the pearly gates," St. Peter said. The Scotsman reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. He shook them and said, "They're bells." St. Peter said, "You may pass through the pearly gates." The Irishman started searching desperately through his pockets and finally pulled out a pair of women's panties. St. Peter looked at the man with a raised eyebrow and asked, "And just what do those symbolize?" The Irishman replied, "These are carols." A blind man went to a restaurant. "Menu, sir?" asked the owner. "I am blind. Just bring me some of your dirty forks. I will smell each one and order," said the blind man. The confused owner went to the kitchen to retrieve some dirty forks and returned to the blind man. The blind man smelled the forks and said, "Yes, I will have the lamb with seasoned potatoes and spring vegetables." Unbelievable, the owner thought. The next day, the blind man returned to the restaurant. The owner, wanting to see how good his smell is, went to the kitchen where his wife Brenda was cooking and said, "Do me a favor and rub this fork in your private part," which she did. The owner returned to the blind man and let him smell the fork. The blind man takes it, puts it to his nose and said, "Oh, interesting. I never knew Brenda worked here." A husband and wife sat down at their table at a coffee shop in New York. The wife saw a pretty young woman sitting at a table and wearing the most gorgeous pair of shoes she's ever seen. "I'd like to know where that lady got those shoes," she said to her husband. The husband walked over to the young woman and asked, "Where did you get those shoes?" "I got them in a store just around the corner from here," replied the woman. "Nice. How much were they?" "Oh, around $300. Thanks for letting me know." The husband returned to his table and said to his wife, "She got her shoes in Los Angeles." A little old lady of 90 goes to the doctor complaining of terrible flatulence. She tells him she is otherwise in perfect health, but the constant wind is very uncomfortable. She adds, "But I'm so grateful that at least it isn't embarrassing. You see, the remarkable thing is, it's always completely silent and it doesn't smell at all. You would have no idea, but I've actually passed wind at least 15 times just during this appointment." The doctor agrees that is indeed remarkable, and he prescribes the old lady a course of tablets and tells her to come back the next week. When she returns, she isn't happy. She tells the doctor that she doesn't think the tablets he prescribed have done her any good at all. She still passes wind just as much, and although it is still completely silent, now it smells absolutely terrible. The doctor nods. "Excellent. Now we've cleared up your sinus problems. Let's see what we can do about your hearing."